going to dive straight in, and we're going to forego introductions, because you already know these four beautiful people. Thank you for all of your interaction on Slack. We've had some amazing questions, and some of them have already been answered, but I promise you that after they're done talking, later today and over the next week, they are eager to continue the conversation with you and answer your questions. I've taken all of the questions that you put in, and I've curated them down to a list, and we'll now spend a half an hour getting your questions answered and learning a little bit more about what they're doing in their organizations. This should be a lot of fun. First off, we're going to start talking about one of the main topics that Benjamin brought up, and that has to do with diversity and accessibility and including all of your users. One of the questions that was asked is talking about edge cases. You had mentioned that an edge case is a potential point of failure, and the question is if that is an edge case, how often do people use that as an excuse to not do work to address it? Because it being an edge case, it's so important and critical, but it's easy to make an excuse around that.
I mean, all the time. It's, you know, as humans, we try and avoid any kind of cognitive friction that there is. So we pick the easiest path to solving problems more often than not. And you know, there are kind of two different ways that people often go about this. When it's to do with unconscious bias, it's more a case of people just don't really acknowledge that these edge cases are there because it's not the shortest route for them to get where they want to go. Yeah. And then there are people on the other side who are like, actually, no, we're going to use this to draw a boundary around what we should be doing. And I mean, there are solutions for dealing with kind of either side of that. Normally people who are just looking for a much shorter path and so are almost accidentally ignoring the edge cases. It's really about raising awareness, and it's about building a case so that they feel empowered to really make a decision and own that narrative and build something for that group. And then for the other group who kind of almost use these edge cases to paint a boundary, I've found that there are our core user groups that people are pushing us to focus on, and it's okay to do that. Like, so many companies have to do that to get to product market fit, and so often you have to do that first before you can then get these hesitant people to start embracing these other edge cases. So it's kind of a bit of give and take.
So there was a neat follow-up question to that around identifying that edge case. And Aryel, I'd be interested to know what you found in your research. Is it better to have them self-identify, or how do you ask them? You know, do you have, especially when you're talking about a disability or something, what have you experienced? Or what would you recommend to our audience as a way to help to identify those edge cases?
Yeah, so to be totally honest, I haven't done a ton of work around accessibility. There are definitely people in my organization who have a lot more knowledge around the right way to approach those kind of cases. But in terms of making sure that we include the edge groups in our research, I think, first of all, so important, right? Like, you look at IDEO, for example, and one of their, that's part of their core ideology as well, is like going to these edges, getting these people in from the edges. But I think it's hard because people don't know what your research is, what you're studying, so it's definitely up to us to identify the spectrum that may exist on a certain project and then recruit for it, right? So I'm like, what's an example of this? There are a million, right? When you're doing education, maybe you would typically only focus on like younger groups, but we could also include elderly people. And I think the thing that's really interesting about edge groups, at least what I've seen, or what really is attractive to me about it, is I feel like there are a lot of really innovative ideas that come out of doing research on the edge groups. Like, not only do we have a responsibility to make sure that everyone is included, I think, like Benjamin's saying, but I also think that we find a lot of really interesting things out on the edges because people are behaving in ways that aren't quite normal, and sometimes those not quite normal ways might actually be a significant improvement to the way that things are currently happening.
So any opinion from anyone here around you assigning a classification to them? versus them self-identifying?
Of like edge or non-edge?
Not necessarily edge. I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you have any recommendations or concern around you somehow identifying a certain characteristic about someone and then providing a certain experience or communicating certain ways to them where they have not specifically chosen that?
I'll take this
Ciara,
in a
go.
kind of different direction that's not necessarily accessibility related, but I like to work with an edge group called the people that don't like my product. And so typically those are the people that are like not going to actually take the time to leave you reviews. Unless they're really mad, then they'll do that as well. But sometimes you have access to them, and so I like this self-inflicted pain of just every like cadence, some period of time, I'll just say, who are like 10 people who just like really can't stand my product, and reach out to them. Typically they reply, because like sometimes they're just like furious about something, and especially if they have to use the product. And you know, by the end of the call, like I've done this where at that point I include the person. I say, hey, well, we're actually like kind of designing something that's in this you know, genre related to what you're thinking about. Would you like to be a design partner? You know, we can get on the phone with you. And we've actually changed someone from like they had they filled out an NPS survey. Their survey was the score was like a 3 or 4 or something, and we got them to an 8 by the end of this process. Not because we solved every problem that they had, but because they were, you know, kind of part of it and understanding the solution. So I find that talking to and interacting with that edge is a pretty helpful way of designing product as well.
Thank you. A question that came during your talk, Vicki, was about the balance between intuition and science. I'd love to get some of your thoughts around that. Specifically, the person was asking for some advice on how to deal with environments or organizations that frown upon the use of intuition. You know, you've got organizations like Google that were historically all just data, right? As that company has grown, they've changed a lot, but they began their roots that way. These type of organizations can tend to forget that product management is a lot of craft opposed to just science. What would you say?
Well, it's not that we didn't use science or didn't use data. It was just that, at least at Headspace, we found that we needed something else on top of it. And I think that if you approach it similarly to kind of how I laid it out in the story, where it's like, look, we used everything at our disposal and still the answer wasn't really clear, hopefully they'll kind of come to an understanding of why you're using this kind of unclear, hard to grasp thing. And then if you just kind of explain what intuition is and demystify it, it's a little like meditation, right? You have this idea of what it is, but it's not really that. It's something you can grow and rely on and sort of comes with experience. So yeah, do you guys have anything to add?
I mean, I'm an advocate for data, but you know, the reason that we all like kind of continue in our careers and try different things and, you know, go down whatever direction it is we choose, you know, there's a reason that companies hire people with a lot of experience. And so from that point of view, I think there's definitely a level where, you know, there are some things that are going to be really obvious to a person who's been working on a problem for 2 or 5 or 10 years that may not be obvious to others. I think data has actually been the most useful for me when working with some of the smartest people, some of the most senior people, CEOs. You have CEOs that will start a company, and typically they're successful for the first, you know, X amount of years because they have that product intuition. But at some point, they need to like scale up. They become busy. They're not going into Jira or like, you know, your analytics dashboard or whatever tool it is that you're tracking all this stuff. And so it still kind of continues to be their opinion. And although most of the time they're right, they need to depend on us as like product people and design people to provide them, you know, with some alternative answers. So I think data is really great for tiebreakers. It's, you know, not only tiebreakers, but like we I cheated and looked at one of your questions. I'm actually going to go ahead and answer it. So one of the questions was, like, what's a good tool for A/B testing? So I'm not going to say, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, go ahead and pick whatever platform or tool it is. That's fine. I'll actually say the one thing that has been really useful for me is actually before we even get any engineers involved, there are some decisions that can be made purely from a design perspective when someone's like, I don't like where that button is, or we debated like a panel on the left side or the right side of the page. Some teams at work for like 2 to 3 months. It was like this heavily contested thing, and I had a hard time convincing people to actually get data. And you know what? I said, I'm just gonna put this on Usability Hub, and like we're gonna do a click test, and we're gonna say perform X action, which is basically like click one thing. And then we found that on the right side, it took like 20 seconds and had like some low success rate. On the left side, it took like 10 seconds and then had double the success rate. That's something that, like, honestly, I wish I had done before, and I'm mad that I didn't. But I could have saved like 2 months of arguing by just putting this like simple thing out there. It's not always going to be conclusive, but you know, sometimes it really is, and then everyone stopped debating about it. So.
I actually love that you transitioned us to A/B testing, because the next question I wanted to ask was related to research. Aryel, during your talk, someone asked specifically about, and they claim there's a hot debate currently going on in the industry, on whether product teams need a dedicated researcher on the individual product teams or whether it's overkill. But I actually would like to ask Benjamin's thought first. I don't want to ask the researcher first. So, would you say that a dedicated researcher can create or add value to an organization? And when would you say it might not be the time?
I believe research should be in the room from day one on every single product decision that there is. Okay. Because, you know, we all have within our specific craft, we've all got areas of focus. And something that I love about the fact that we have a dedicated researcher is that she grounds everything we do in insights that are direct from users, that brings this level of added context and awareness that we just couldn't get without her. And so it gives me a really nice sense of certainty, knowing that when I design, when I build, decisions we make are just rooted in something other than intuition, and sometimes other than just raw numerical data, but also like insights from people. Yeah.
So as we've heard in some of the talks today, we're making really good progress as an industry, cross-functional teams. One of the major messages that we try to preach here from front is what we call the triumvirate: a product manager, a UX or a design manager, and an engineering manager. That you have this cross-functional, autonomous team. What are your thoughts, Aryel, in terms of each one of those teams having a dedicated full-time researcher? Obviously, that would be ideal. I don't think any of you would disagree there. But when is the time to add that? You know, if you had an organization that had, say, 10 different teams or 20 different teams, and you can't have a dedicated researcher on each one of those, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, because the reality is that we can't always have a researcher, even though I totally agree with what Benjamin said. And I would say that, like, the moment where we definitely need to like make that investment is when we start hitting walls. So either in terms of frequency or quality. So let me explain. What I mean is, let's say you have a team, you have a PM, you have a UX researcher, an engineering partner, and your PM and designer together are actually like really successfully doing a lot of research. They're getting great usability findings, maybe they're doing, you know, some foundational work, and they feel like things are going really well. Okay, well, maybe for now that's all right, but let's imagine that you have, you know, another group And that group wants to do research, but they don't have the time. They have too many projects, so they're running into issues in terms of the frequency that they would like to be hitting with research. Or maybe they're running into quality issues. So that might be something like they just don't have the knowledge about different research methodologies to really effectively be researching those projects. Or maybe they're running into quality issues in that they, maybe there's some mistrust within the group. They feel like, oh, interesting, your findings seems to line up with exactly what you thought. So I think that becomes a real quality issue. So I would say when you start seeing either those issues in terms of frequency, so like time demands not allowing these people to do it, or quality expertise issues, then that's a moment when you really need to stop as an organization and consider carefully what you do next, because I think it can have long-term consequences for your product.
Well, and my question might have been a little bit leading. Perhaps the answer isn't what is the right timing for that to scale. Mm-hmm. Maybe the answer is that it should be that way from day one. Mm-hmm. Basically, would anyone disagree that you have an incomplete team without a dedicated researcher?
I don't disagree with that statement. I think when you're in a small company, like let's say you're a brand new startup and you have like fewer than 20 people, you really just don't have those resources to get someone full time. So you could advocate that, like, having a designer, PM. I mean, there's a lot of debate you could have over how you structure that team. I think the challenge with it is, when I worked at a small startup and was like building out that team, we actually set a goal of doing a certain amount of research activities ourselves. The problem is, yes, like if you haven't gone through the formal research training or you don't have a lot of experience there, that's not your key area, probably likely to build bias tests, whether you want to be doing that or not, and kind of going for, you'll end up with the result that you're looking for. So I think just quality is an issue at that point. So there is something about scale, because at some point it's like, you got to have, maybe you got to have a sales guy that goes out there and you're debating, should I do user research, which is something someone could kind of do?
Sure.
Or, I think that the points that you made were very legitimate.
So I love something that you had, or I'm interested in something you had said there about the structure of the team and maybe it being controversial. I'd love to get the panel's opinion on this, because I would have thought that the structure of the team was probably pretty universally accepted now. I wouldn't say that it is completely worked out. I'd say that that all of the companies out there are still trying to figure out the right balance and process. But I would be curious, do you feel like that there are any people out there that feel like maybe that balance or that trend is not right? Let's talk a little bit about the relationship between a product manager and a user experience designer, especially someone who has transitioned from design to product management. There was also someone in the audience who had asked Ben specifically, saying, hey, I'm a design lead myself. I'm struggling trying to find the right relationship between me and my product manager. Are we equal? Are we peers? Who wears the pants? Who gets to decide what color the pants are? Do we wear suspenders? Anyway, Vicki, let's have you start. Tell us about your relationship with your designer the designer product manager relationship.
Yeah, this one, this is a very important thing for designers, more so than PMs, I feel like. I think a lot of times in companies, they tend to be product-driven, data-driven, and that's kind of like why I was talking about what I was talking, because it's easy to start with data, and usually the PM is in the meetings, like at the table or whatever you want, and it feels more infrequent that PMs and designers are kind of at the same level where they're making decisions about the product and things like that. So I've worked with a number of PMs before Headspace. I was at Lyft. And I feel like the ones that I've worked the best with, and that's the one that I have now, too. He's from Salt Lake. His name is Gary, like the snail. The snail from SpongeBob. He actually gave a talk very similar to the one I gave. I just copied it a little bit. And to hear a PM say things like that, to come from the designer's point of view and kind of like it felt like he had taken the words or the thoughts out of my mouth and found a much more coherent way of saying them. It's just like very just magical when that happens, because you're like, you get it, like he gets it. He complains when like door handles are like the wrong pull push, and he just kind of I think he understands design and he appreciates those things. And the same with, that's how he is with engineers as well. Like he's kind of learning code and things on the side, and so in that way he's a little bit of everything, and that makes him really easy to work with, because when we have to negotiate, sometimes we give up the polish or sort of the delight, and sometimes we have to implement something a different way. He's able to kind of join everyone's point of view so that we don't butt heads so much. And so, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
That's like the ideal PM to me.
Yep.
Hi, Gary.
Benjamin?
Sure. I mean, I used to butt heads a lot with PMs. And it took, like right now I actually have a fantastic PM, name is Rusha. And what it actually kind of like boiled down to is just very different ways of working, in the sense that I'm very much a let's plan out, like let's look ahead 1, 3, 5 years into the future, figure out where we want to get to, then start like reverse engineering it back to what we're going to do today and tomorrow and the week after. Whereas a lot of PMs that I've worked with almost do the opposite. We need to keep the roadmaps filled today, tomorrow, the next week, and so they want to build it from the ground up. Yeah. And so there's just this tension that happens where it's like, I'm saying, no, I can't design anything till I have a vision, a larger direction. They're like, well, no, we have to keep the rest of the team going. We can't spin our wheels figuring this out. And so it took a while for me to actually get my head around the idea that what was undercutting both of us was just a lack of understanding about the roles. Really about the nuance of each specific thing. I didn't know enough about the value that product management brings, and product managers I've worked with in the past didn't know enough about the nuance and the value that design brings. And so because of that, coupled with a different workflow, there was just a lot of butting heads, even though you're trying to do the same thing.
Can you think of some specific things that you and your product manager did to come to that clarity, or was it just spending time with each other?
We argued.
Argued?
Yeah. No, we actually did. Like
That's good.
Not like yelling at each other,
Sure.
but just kind of like not a productive kind of creative tension.
Do you feel like there's a certain amount of time that is a minimum needed to develop that relationship?
I don't know if it's an amount of time, but I would say it has to be a certain amount of experiences, how you choose to define that.
Okay.
Like you can go through a very tough product cycle with a PM you've never met and come out the other side and you get everything about each other in a professional sense. Yeah. And then there are some PMs, or some experiences, should I say, that there aren't enough tension to bring out the bad parts in each of your workflows. Yeah. And so you're not challenged to confront that. And so in those type scenarios, it kind of is just go through until you figure out your way of working together.
Yeah. And then Ciara, about your transition.
Yeah, I think so. I think like aligning on the goals is like is a pretty important thing. And so I like your example that you gave, which is probably as you work together, you kind of figure out more of the goals, and you say, well, I'm working to achieve that goal by going to this vision first. And maybe the PM was like, well, I have a goal that I really need to get a roadmap out, but I want to figure that out. And so I think that's part of it. The one, I guess, message I would have for like any designer like thinking about product management is like, guess what? So at one point I decided, I think I want to do product, but I'm not quite sure. And I thought, how do I do this? Like, what are my prerequisites? Guess what? Like, there's no handbook for product. Really, it's like, what are we trying to accomplish, and what are the steps that need to be taken to get there? So in some element, it's the project. Some element, it is design and working with the people around you. So as far as the transition goes, I think it's more about like finding the right opportunity. Like the way that I moved into product was, I started working on general design, and then I worked on a very specific industry design at a large company, and then a startup that was just starting out, approached me, and I thought, well, okay, this is cool because I actually have the most industry expertise. So even though I had never done the PM stuff before, I'd worked with PMs, and I had the industry expertise. So I just figured it out, like as I was going, and like through the sort of like product networks and meeting other product people, it's really the same thing. There's not that, like every product job and even every design job is different depending on the company and problem that you're trying to solve. So that was really the experience, is like, just do it.
And it's fascinating how like it changes, so much depending on the team that you're on and the problem that you're solving and the organization that you're in, and you kind of have to continually define and redefine your relationship relative to the project and the challenges that you're on with your PM. But I mean, I would encourage everyone here to really earn that relationship because you're partners in this. You're trying to achieve the same thing. You both want each other to be successful.
And you said you didn't feel like there was necessarily a certain ramp-up time that's required. Do you feel like that there's a minimum amount of time that teams should be together before you shuffle? You know, should you be on a project together for 6 months, for a year?
I feel like that's so hard. So something that's interesting working at LinkedIn is we're really into like getting to know each other. So, and by that I mean in kind of structured ways. So like, for example, my team took this test called 5 Dynamics. And the idea was that we would, take this test, we would understand more about ourselves, and then we could share that as a team and work better together. And so, yeah, I think it's difficult because every team is so different. People work in such different ways. So the test showed me not what I'm like good or bad at, but what gives me energy. And I saw what the other members of my team got energy from. And it was really interesting because I thought, oh, okay, when I have this problem, I should go to Anton because he's like off the charts on Examine. And so it really helped us work together. But the reason I thought of that when you just made that comment was because I feel like some people get a lot of energy from, working together and like developing these really strong relationships. People who work in, agency settings or more consulting settings hopefully get energy from changing teams and having, like a dynamic work group and work environment. So I feel like it's really hard when you want to get like prescriptive with product groups because it feels like it would change so much person to person.
Yeah, I feel like those, whatever you want to call them, like Myers-Briggs or even love languages, like all those like categorization things, while they're somewhat overarching, they're really helpful just to remind you where someone is coming from. And this reminds me of a story about Gary again. He's gonna laugh if he watches this. But we were doing a one-on-one. We do them every other week, and we were walking. He's got really excited. He's like, I'm reading this book called Managing Humans or something like that. And he was like, I understand it now. Like, you're a completionist, and I'm an incrementalist. And that kind of goes to what Benjamin was saying about, like, I'm thinking of this, like, gold version of the thing, the experience, and he's thinking, like, what can we get out first to even see if it's worth everyone's time? And the fact that he was, like, reading those books or wanting to share that knowledge and kind of applying it back is just really helpful. It's what makes him a good collaborator and kind of, like, his like want to understand where everyone is coming from is just so important for the PM role.
Do all of your companies function under the arranged marriage type of approach? Meaning, do you have self-forming teams? Do you get to choose your product management pair? Do you get to put together your cross-functional team? Or does leadership just come in and say, Benjamin, you're paired up with so-and-so. Have at it. You guys are now basically going to spend a third of every day for the next year together. You better get along.
Yes. No, it's actually both. I mean, all the product teams within Airbnb work as cross-functional groups. So we do have, a team will have an engineer, a data scientist, researcher, designer. Yeah. And people gravitate towards specific problems when they join the company, and that will form the team that they join. But then over time, people will be switched out sometimes. And so it very much is a mix. It just depends on where people's interests are, where they feel that their career path wants to take them, and what best serves the larger narrative and the larger good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say for us it's both as well. Our research program is actually pretty interesting at LinkedIn because it's rotational. So I can stay on my team for a year, or if I really am enjoying the work, I could stay for 5 years or something on that particular team. And so when I started at the company, I had a choice of which area I wanted to work in, and then I also, at the beginning of every quarter, they allow us to, kind of work with your manager to choose projects. So I would say it's a bit of both.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us today and for all of your thoughts. Let's give a big round of applause to.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Benjamin, Ciara, Aryel, and Vicki.